Taylor believed this Christmas would finally be different. Not just tinsel and lights, not just matching sweaters and awkward small talk. This year she hoped for something deeper: redemption, recognition. A moment where she finally felt like family again. She spent days planning everything down to the last detail. A thoughtful gift for her father, a vintage tool set she found at a thrift shop, a delicate ornament for her mother hand-painted wrapped in silver tissue, and for her brother and his fiancée, a polished photo frame for their engagement picture. Each gift chosen with care, with a quiet hope that maybe this time they'd see her. In her small apartment above the bakery, Taylor steamed her best green dress until the wrinkles vanished. She practiced what she'd say in the mirror. "I've got a new job offer in Dayton, higher pay, a bigger place. Things are finally looking up." She smiled just enough to show strength, but not so much it looked desperate. In her heart, Taylor still wanted what every child wants: a parent's pride, a sibling's respect, a seat at the table where love isn't earned but given. And maybe, just maybe, this Christmas would be her chance. It started with a cheerful phone call. Taylor had barely picked up when her mother's voice rang through bright chipper rehearsed. "We're so excited this year, honey. Everyone's coming, everyone." Those 8 letters curled like smoke and settled heavy in Taylor's chest. Her mother began to list the names like an award ceremony. Aunt Geraldine, the retired principal; Uncle Roger, the tax attorney; Cousin Craig, fresh off winning another corporate case; and of course, Dr. and Mrs. Thompson, Patricia's parent, surgeon, and socialite. This wasn't a Christmas dinner. It was a curated guest list, a showcase, a performance in pearls and prestige. Taylor nodded along on the phone, smiling through the growing weight behind her eyes. Each name wasn't just a person. It was a comparison. Each RSVP was another layer of expectation, another reminder of how far she'd fallen in their eyes. She hung up the phone with a polite goodbye, then stared out the window of her tiny apartment, where bakery smoke curled through frosted glass. Her heart thudded. She wasn't being invited to a celebration. She was being summoned to a trial. Taylor hadn't even stepped over the threshold when the air shifted. The warmth from the twinkling lights outside didn't reach the inside. It was cold, decorated, sparkling, silent cold. She stood at the door for half a second too long, her hands still gripping the wrapped gift like a shield. The farmhouse looked like a Christmas card, garlands, wreaths, soft music drifting from inside. But the welcome felt rehearsed. Dennis opened the door, his smile polished and politician perfect. "Linda, you made it," he said, warm tone but brief. Patricia appeared behind him, dressed in cream silk with pearls at her neck. She tilted her head, offered a smile so thin it could cut glass. "That color looks good on you," she said, like it was a surprise that anything ever could. Taylor stepped in and every eye found her. Aunt Geraldine looked up from her seat by the fire. Uncle Roger barely nodded. Cousin Craig scanned her from head to toe like a courtroom witness. She felt stripped, weighed, measured, and found lacking. Her heels clicked against the hardwood as she walked in, each step louder than the Christmas music in the background. She was not a guest, she was a defendant. They didn't just walk into the room, they entered like royalty. Dennis, the golden boy, had the kind of confidence that didn't need volume. It was in his walk, his perfectly ironed blazer, the way everyone paused mid-conversation when he laughed. Patricia floated beside him, her cream-colored dress catching the chandelier light like it was made of silk and privilege. Her pearls weren't just jewelry, they were armor. People didn't just like them, they admired them, worshipped them. Every handshake with Dennis came with a compliment. Every glance at Patricia was followed by a quiet wow. They had that effortless, untouchable glow, and Taylor felt it like standing next to a spotlight and realizing you were the shadow. When Patricia turned toward her with that polished, poised smile, Taylor braced herself. "That color looks good on you," Patricia said sweetly, but the sweetness was lacquered over something sharper. It was the kind of compliment you gave someone when you didn't expect them to pull it off, when you were shocked that they even showed up looking human. Taylor smiled, but her cheeks burned. No one else noticed the jab, but Taylor felt it like a paper cut right across the soul, small and visible, but deep. And just like that, she knew exactly where she stood beneath him. Dinner hadn't even started, but the war had. Not with yelling, but with stories harmless on the surface, but sharp just beneath. The table buzzed with success. Craig bragged about a new condo purchase near the golf club. Uncle Roger shared his firm's latest million-dollar client. Even Patricia chimed in about the new wing opening at the hospital she was helping oversee. Her voice was soft, but her words sparkled like diamonds. Every sentence was a resume, every laugh a medal, every silence an accusation. Taylor sat at the far end, smiling politely, nodding at the right time, slowly dissolving into the wallpaper. She tried once to mention something. My new place is above a bakery. It smells like cinnamon every morning. But before she could finish, Dr. Thompson interrupted with a story about his yacht trip in Greece. Her words vanished, like a whisper in a stadium. She wasn't invisible. She was unwanted background noise. As plates clinked and stories grew louder, Taylor looked around and realized this wasn't conversation. It was performance. And she hadn't been given a script. She waited for the noise to die down, for just one quiet second where maybe, just maybe, she could speak and be heard. And then it came, a lull in the laughter, a brief pause between champagne toasts and Italian villa daydreams. Taylor took a breath and stepped into the silence. I've been offered a new position, senior coordinator. In Dayton, she said, her voice calm but proud. It comes with a raise and I'll be moving into a bigger apartment soon. For a moment, the world held still, and then came the reply. That's nice, someone said. No eye contact, no follow-up questions, just a soft nod and then anyway, Tuscany. You should see the views from the villa, Patricia chimed in. Her phone was already out, swiping through vineyard photos like flipping trophies. Laughter returned. The spotlight shifted back, and Taylor. She disappeared again without ever leaving the table. The daggers weren't under the table. They were in plain sight now. What began as subtle digs had now turned into sharp jabs coated in smiles, delivered in perfectly timed phrases. New companies vanish overnight, Uncle Roger said, swirling his wine like a professor stating a universal truth. Stability matters, Craig added, his voice cool, calculated like a closing argument in court. Taylor didn't respond. She didn't have to. The glances said enough. They were talking about her, and they wanted her to know. Patricia leaned in, resting her manicured fingers on her wine glass. We're flying to Chicago next week to look at dresses, she announced. Custom couture. I've got a fitting at White Lotus Bridal. You know, the one that only works by appointment. Everyone nodded approvingly, even Grandma Geraldine, who normally hated big city nonsense. But for Patricia, it was acceptable, expected. Across the table, Craig launched into a monologue about his new house. 3-car garage, walk-in wine cellar, school district ranked in the top 5. The words dripped with pride and something else, possession. Taylor sat still, her fork untouched, her voice silenced. Everything she had fought to rebuild, her job, her apartment, her sanity, meant nothing here. This wasn't dinner, it was dominance, and she was the designated loser. Taylor hadn't asked for a spotlight, but suddenly it found her. The conversation had swirled past her for nearly an hour, over her, around her, but never toward her. She had become furniture, silent, still unseen. Then came the setup. You know, Dennis said, loud enough to hush the table. Taylor's always been great with people. The words hung in the air, fragile and heavy all at once. A few polite smiles circled the table. One aunt gave a half-hearted like the kind you give when someone says they collect stamps. Taylor froze. It sounded like a compliment, but it felt like charity, a participation trophy handed out at a pity parade. Great with people was the thing you said when someone had no job title worth mentioning, no house tour worth offering, no champagne toast waiting to be raised. It wasn't admiration, it was mercy, wrapped in a ribbon of condescension. She managed a small laugh. It cracked at the edges. She didn't need her brother to defend her. She needed him to stop making her feel like a lost cause. But of course, Dennis had already turned back to Patricia, laughing about wedding bands and vineyard menus. And Taylor. She sat there feeling smaller than the silverware. It started slowly, like a sermon hidden inside a story, like poison in a cup of tea. Uncle Roger leaned back in his chair, swirling his wine voice low and knowing. Choices have consequences, he said, staring straight ahead. Not at Taylor, but not at her either. Craig picked up the thread. Persistence separates winners from quitters. He added, his tone sharp like a closing argument, sharpened by too many courtroom victories. Dr. Thompson, calm and clinical, chimed in next. By your late 20s, you should know where you're headed. Life isn't a rehearsal. And just like that, the table became a jury box, and Taylor was on trial. No one called her name, no one pointed a finger. but she felt it like heat on the back of her neck. The weight of their words didn't land with kindness. They landed like stones. Every phrase cloaked in wisdom, but built on judgment. Taylor looked down at her plate barely touched. Her fork rested beside a slice of untouched pie, as if even dessert had given up on her. This wasn't advice. It was execution by philosophy, and with each sentence, they weren't just saying she failed. They were saying she deserved to. It happened during dessert. Just when Taylor thought the worst was over, the scent of cinnamon and baked apples filled the air. Her mother had just placed the final slice of pie on the table, golden, steaming, delicate. And then she stood, glass in hand, eyes glistening, not with tears, but with something colder, sharpened. "This conversation needs to happen," she said, her voice slicing through the laughter like a blade. Silence fell like a curtain. "We're ashamed of you." The words didn't explode. They landed harder than fists, quieter than gunfire, but somehow more devastating than both. Taylor blinked. The room blurred. The pie in front of her turned into static. The chandelier above seemed to hum with tension, and then laughter. Not the kind you share after a joke, not the kind that warms a room. This was sharp, nervous, almost gleeful. Dennis chuckled first. "That's smug, I agree, but won't say it out loud," laugh. Then Craig joined in, head shaking like he'd just won another trial. Even Uncle Roger let out a short, cruel grunt of amusement. Their laughter didn't echo. It stabbed. And Taylor, she didn't cry. Not yet, because shock comes first, then grief, then the fire. One insult might have been survivable. But this was a group effort. Dennis let out a soft chuckle. Not loud, just loud enough to sting. "Maybe Mom's right," he said with a smirk, his eyes refusing to meet Taylor's. "Maybe you needed to hear it." Craig followed with a smug nod like a judge satisfied with a guilty verdict. "Truth hurts," he muttered, raising his glass in mock agreement. Uncle Roger leaned back in his chair, tilting his wine like a toast to cruelty. He didn't speak. He didn't have to. His silence clapped louder than any insult. Taylor scanned the table, desperate, pleading for one face. Just one. Dad. But her father cleared his throat, avoiding her gaze. "Your mother's right." 6 words, no soul behind them. Only compliance, only cowardice. And just like that, every person at that table became a blade. Each smile a slice. Each nod a cut. Each laugh a wound. Taylor sat frozen, heart pounding so loud it drowned out the Christmas carols. Her hands clenched under the table nails, digging into her own skin just to feel something real. This wasn't a family dinner. It was a public execution in formal wear. No one spoke, no one defended her, not even with their eyes. Taylor scanned the room, desperate, frantic, hoping, begging for one flicker of empathy. A glance, a frown, averted eyes. Anything to say, "I see you, I know this is wrong." But there was nothing, just the clinking of silverware, the sound of someone refilling wine, and the dull hum of a Christmas carol playing in a room that suddenly felt colder than snow. Taylor sat there surrounded by the people who were supposed to love her, and felt more alone than she had the night she left her husband. At least that night there had been clarity, a decision, a door she chose to close. But this was betrayal wearing a family crest. Love weaponized. Silence used as a verdict. She felt it in her bones, the sensation of sinking, of drifting out of her own body, of becoming invisible. Not to the world, but to the people who once held her as a baby. Her hands trembled beneath the table. Her throat burned, but no sound came. She was still breathing, still blinking, but Taylor was vanishing. She stood, slowly, deliberately. Her chair scraped against the hardwood floor, breaking the fragile rhythm of fork and glass. The sound was soft, but it cracked through the room like a gunshot. Taylor's eyes swept across the table. Cold, focused, alive. For the first time all night, she was shrinking. She was rising. No more trembling hands, no more polite smiles, no more hoping they'd see her worth. She had seen enough. And in that stillness, something shifted. Craig's smirk faltered. Uncle Roger lowered his glass. Even Patricia's perfect posture stiffened, because they all saw it now. The fire, the storm, the reckoning. Taylor wasn't here to cry. She was here to burn it all down. "You're ashamed of me?" Taylor's voice didn't shake. It rang. "Then let me show you what shame really looks like." She turned first to her mother. The room held its breath. "Shame is sneaking around with your tennis coach while your husband was at work. It's deleting texts at 2 a.m. and pretending Richard moved to Florida when I was 12. Do you really think I didn't notice her mother's face went white? Her fork froze midair. No one spoke. Then Taylor turned to her father, who gripped his glass so hard it trembled. Shame is drinking yourself to sleep, hiding whiskey bottles behind the Christmas decorations in the garage. Stumbling into my room, reeking of liquor, thinking I wouldn't know. His jaw clenched, but he said nothing. Taylor pivoted to Dennis, her golden boy brother, the untouchable. And Dennis, should I tell Patricia about sophomore year Jennifer Morrison? You begged me to cover your cheating. You swore it was a mistake. Patricia's eyes darted to Dennis. He shifted pale and frozen. Or maybe last month's phone call, when you said this engagement felt like a trap, when you cried and told me marrying her was the worst decision of your life. The silence deepened. Forks stopped moving. Hands dropped from wine glasses. The table wasn't quiet. It was stunned. It was bleeding. And Taylor. She was just getting started. The silence was total. Even the chandelier seemed to stop trembling. Taylor stood there, shoulders back, eyes blazing. She looked at them, the whole table, the whole performance, the whole legacy of whispered shame and silent judgment. And then she smiled. Not a forced smile, not a polite one. A smile forged from fire, from survival, from freedom. You're ashamed of me. Her voice was calm, clean, sharp as broken glass. Good. She took one step back, picked up her coat, slipped her purse over her shoulder. I'm proud of it. No one moved. No one breathed. Even the Christmas lights seemed to flicker in stunned silence. She turned, walked to the door. Each step steady, each heartbeat louder than applause. And when she reached the doorway, she paused. Just once. No tears, no final plea, just clarity, just fire. Taylor walked out and left behind a house full of ghosts choking on their own perfection. The door closed behind her with a click. Final, clean, like the end of a sentence that didn't need a reply. Outside, the world was quiet. Snow drifted through the air like ash, soft, slow, healing. Each step Taylor took felt lighter. Not because her body was free, but because something heavier had finally been left behind. The cold air hit her cheeks, but it didn't sting. It woke her up. The farmhouse shrank behind her, its windows glowing warm but falsely, so like a stage that had gone dark after the curtain closed. Taylor didn't look back. Not once. She didn't need to. Some endings don't deserve a backward glance, only a forward step. Her car was waiting where she left it. Dusty, familiar, home. She drove back in silence, the radio off, the hum of tires on snow, the only sound she needed. And when she arrived, her tiny apartment above the bakery stood waiting. Modest, quiet, honest, everything the farmhouse never was. Inside, the warmth wrapped around her like a truth. And the scent of cinnamon and fresh bread welcomed her, like a friend who never judged. This wasn't just a return. It was a beginning that didn't need a family name to feel like home. The next morning, there were no ornaments, no gifts, no tree, just a pair of old sneakers, a warm coat, and a decision. Taylor walked into the downtown shelter just after sunrise. Inside, the air was filled with the scent of oatmeal and brewed coffee. Volunteers moved like clockwork, smiling, serving, listening. And in that small, bustling space, Taylor felt something she hadn't in years. Purpose, not performance. She rolled up her sleeves, grabbed a ladle, and began pouring warm soup into chipped white bowls, one after another, after another. And as each person passed her tray, they said thank you. Not because she had a title, not because they knew her resume, just because she showed up. No one asked about her career. No one compared apartments. No one whispered, "You're not enough." They smiled, some with missing teeth, some with eyes that had seen too many winters. But they smiled with something real, and Taylor smiled back. Because for the first time in so long she was seen. Not for who she had failed to become, but for who she truly was. Life didn't change overnight, but it changed. Slowly, quietly. Like dawn bleeding into sky, her new job in Dayton turned out to be more than a promotion. It was a doorway to confidence, to stability, to people who didn't ask where she came from, but where she wanted to go. She made friends. Not the kind who asked what her parents did, the kind who remembered her coffee order, checked on her when she was quiet, laughed with her instead of at her, and one of them, a graphic designer named Eli, stayed after the laughter faded. They met at a local fundraiser, talked about cinnamon rolls and bad Christmas movies. He never once asked why she flinched at the word family. He just listened. And over time, in long walks and quiet dinners, through small notes and soft hands, Taylor felt something she hadn't known she was missing. A love that didn't require her to shrink. A love that didn't ask her to perform. A love that didn't hurt. No comparisons. No condescension. No conditions. Just eyes that saw her. All of her, and didn't look away. She thought about that night more often than she admitted. Not with bitterness. Not even with grief. But with clarity. Because in that moment when her mother raised a glass and shattered her, something else had broken too. The illusion, the need, the chase. Taylor used to spend years trying to earn something that should have been given freely: love, respect, a place at the table. She bent herself backward, twisted her voice, smiled, when it hurt, all for a version of family that only existed in Christmas cards. But that night it ended, and it had to. If it hadn't, she might still be sitting in that chair, measuring herself against someone else's ruler, shrinking to fit their mold, starving for scraps of approval. But now she saw it. All of it. The dysfunction, the control, the inherited silence passed down like fine china. And she chose not to carry it anymore. Sometimes freedom doesn't come with a door swinging open. It comes from choosing never to walk back in. People used to say she was strong because she stayed, because she smiled, because she didn't cause trouble. But now Taylor knew better. Strength isn't staying when everything inside you is screaming to go. It's not smiling through pain. It's not swallowing silence. Strength is standing up when every voice around you says, sit down. Strength is walking out when everyone else says, but they're family. Strength is breaking and still choosing to rebuild. For years, Taylor thought endurance was the measure of courage. How much you could carry, how much you could tolerate, how little space you could take up without being a burden. But real courage is setting it all down, walking away, and deciding this pain doesn't get to own me anymore. She didn't break because she was weak. She broke because she was done. And in that breaking, she finally became whole. Taylor's story didn't end in silence. It became a voice, a lifeline, a mirror for others who'd been told to shrink, to smile, to stay quiet. She started to speak, not to be praised, but to say what she once needed to hear. You are not alone. You are not broken. You are not selfish for walking away. She shared it all: the betrayal, the exile, the rebirth, and people listened. Because it wasn't just her story. It was theirs too. For every person who sat through a dinner like hers. For every woman who measured her worth by someone else's standards. For every soul still trying to be enough for people who'll never truly see them. Taylor became a lighthouse. And as her story closes, we hear her voice, soft but certain. Have you ever had to walk away to survive? Tell me. I'm listening. The lesson from Taylor's story is simple, but powerful. Family isn't always defined by blood. It's defined by love, respect, and safety. Sometimes walking away from people who diminish you isn't weakness. It's survival. It's strength. And it's the first step toward building the life and the family you truly deserve. Never confuse endurance with courage. Courage is choosing yourself even when it means disappointing others. Because in the end, the only approval you'll ever need is your own. If Taylor's journey touched you, remember this: you are not alone. There are thousands of us learning to walk away, to rebuild, to rise stronger. Subscribe to Through Her Eyes for more powerful stories like this. Stories of survival, of courage, of finding your voice again. And share your own story in the comments, because strength grows when we tell the truth. And your voice matters here.